present to you all night, but we are here to find out what you want to know and to answer some of the questions you might have about officiating. So we're really delighted to have Claire stay with us from an athlete's perspective and also Steve from an official's perspective, not just as a lead official in the game, but also then in his role as a mentor for many other officials and has overseen the National Rugby League's mentoring program for coaching of the officials that are coming through. But I'm going to start while I get ready, Clarkie, with you for a question. I loved hearing Belinda talk about the pathway and the fact that this was her career, it was her chosen career, and she made decisions as a female in that man's world. I'm just curious from your perspective, because when she came through, I know you were behind the scenes and did a lot of work around the NRL in terms of what you offered the young officials, men and women. But how much work did you have to do behind the scenes to enable that for her, or was it her driving the scene? So I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Nunny. So in the case of Belinda essentially drove her own trip. Her destiny is under her control.
Sorry, I've got one thing I've got to say. If you want something else to eat, can you grab it now? Because we're going to clear the food. End of the commercial. Back to you. Sorry.
No, get into the pies, they're getting cold. So Belinda drove her own trip. She was in charge of her destiny. Certainly behind the scenes, and the point that Claire made about it, the elite level of netball, there's a 50-50 split, between men and women officials. In our sport, it's nowhere near that, clearly. We have 2 female officials in the NRL squad, and we have a number of others in the lower, in the grassroots areas and the sub-elite levels of our game. We're doing a lot behind the scenes to try and drive the respect of the ability to have female officials in our sport, because as you said, it's been viewed by a number of people, predominantly older males in the sport, who think it's a man's world, and how dare, and I've heard old guys, dinosaurs as they're referred to by some people. I've heard these fellows say, well, what are these Sheilas doing in our sport? I'm a father of 4 daughters. I detest the fact that our sport had that view. I'm glad to say that it now no longer has that view. There's been a lot of work done behind the scenes to try and make the pathway for female officials in our sport a lot easier. Having said that, Belinda, and I know Belinda and I had some discussions some years ago about this very topic, but Belinda's success is all of her own making. It's not because Belinda is a female, it's because Belinda is a good official. In fact, she's better than a good official, she's a fantastic official. And she should be congratulated for that. But, we are doing a lot of work to try and ensure that females get the same opportunities as the guys, and that's the critical thing, the same opportunities. So their talent can be recognised, and if they earn the spot, they get the spot. And that's the way it should be, in my view.
So do you think, Steve, there is still that, you said it's not there, but surely there must be still that attitude of, well, maybe she won't ever get the grand final. We can accept she's officiating that level, but would there be some resistance to her turning up for the grand final or a state of origin, or do you think that really it's seriously changing?
No, I honestly believe it's changing. If Belinda is the best person for the job, she should get it. There is no doubt about that. And anybody who's got an issue with that, to be quite frank, they don't deserve a spot in our sport. From my point of view, they can nick off, because females deserve every opportunity, as do males. All's we're about in our sport, and I would think any sport should be, the best make it to the top. I don't care whether you're a Calathumpian, male, female, you're from the back of Burke, you're from Townsville, wherever. If you're the best, you deserve the spot.
Thanks, Clarkie. Claire, I'd like to come back and pick up on the younger days when you were an official and you tried umpiring. You were very passionate and very clear about all players should try officiating. So I just want to expand on that a little bit, because there would be some very timid athletes. I mean, people at young ages are very different in their late stages of development. Being 6 foot tall probably gave you a presence on the court that others may not have had at the same age.
Not when you don't stand with your shoulders back, Chris.
But I'm wondering about your statement, because we could. I'm a coach, and coaching athletes, there's a state of readiness they need to achieve before you put them into the heat of battle. And I'm just wondering how you would manage that environment for young children, where some of them be walk into it straight away and do a great job. We could actually really challenge some of them to say, oh, this sport's not for me, if we were to do that. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's about throwing them into it before they're not ready, and that's probably something that I wasn't prepared to umpire. I wasn't prepared to be in that position, but I think we should be engaging our girls in umpiring in some, or not just our girls, but all sport, in some way, shape or form. So whether that's that you have they take it in turns at your training session to umpire your half court or umpire your scrimmage matches at the end of a game under supervision, so they're getting the experience and the opportunities. Because Belinda mentioned before when she was speaking, like, you can watch things, you can watch each other and you can see things, but the only way you learn is by really doing and making mistakes and having somebody be there to guide and sort of, I suppose, show you and educate you on how to improve in that space. So I think that what we need to have a focus on is ensuring that all of our players across all of the sports that we have are equipped with those skills. So it's not that we throw them all into the deep end and just see who sinks and who swims. It's about equipping them with the skills so that when they do go and do that, they feel more prepared and they're more likely to have an enjoyable experience as a result of it. And that's not to say that they're not going to still hate it, or they're not going to feel like they're not confident and that they won't be able to make the right decisions. But at least they'll be in a better position to do it. And as I said, the main reason that I think it's really important is because it's going to make them better players if they do play the sport, and not all of the players who play sport, or not all of the athletes, are going to make it to the top level. We know that. That's just the way that the world works. But we do want to keep them engaged in what they're doing. We want to keep as many kids participating in sport, as many teenagers, as many adults continuing to contribute to our sporting communities across their whole entire lifespan. So by providing them with the opportunities to do that, whether it's through a playing pathway, an officiating pathway, or a volunteering pathway, we're giving them options and reasons to stay, and we're showing them why they do what they love and what they get out of it. And that's why I think it's really important that we do place an emphasis on everybody giving it a go.
So out of that comes the question to both of you. Regional Queensland, resources. Human resources is the issue that most regional communities will face. So you said quite eloquently there that we need to provide them with the support to learn. Whose responsibility is that at club level, and how do we overcome the human resource issue?
Do you want me to start?
Either one.
Thanks. So in rugby league, we're very fortunate in this area. So in Townsville, we have a referee development officer who works for the NRL. He's sitting up the back of the room, Michael Inman. Does a great job. The problem for Mick, his area stretches from Mackay in the south to Thursday Island in the north to Mount Isa in the west. And well, he's got the Northern Territory too. But so he's got a large area. He's a one-man band. But when you come to regional centres like Townsville, we've got a referees association that works here, which has all of the referees, the junior referees, the senior referees, so the adults, who they get. That association is involved alongside Mick and a number of other volunteers in coaching, mentoring and developing those officials. We have a national structure of officiating in our game now, where officials across the board are all educated the same, they're provided with the same opportunities. We try to encourage them to, all games are refereed in a very similar fashion from under sixes through to NRL level, with obvious exceptions, on speeds of games and the level of the players that are playing. But so from our point of view in our sport, we're really lucky from that perspective. Could we have more resources? Absolutely. And I'm sure Mick would agree with that, given his workload and the area he needs to cover. But I understand that's not the same for all sports. We're very fortunate in rugby league. But I do think that sports need to invest more heavily in, and I think the point that Claire makes is very valid. You know, we want, there's not every participant, whether it be a child or a young adult or an adult, are going to make it as a player. Whether they're aspirational to make it to the top, or you know, they might just after a while, a bit like Claire's experience with umpiring netball, said, no, I don't want to do this. They might not want to play anymore, but we want to keep them in the game. So we need to invest to ensure that those youngsters, regardless of the sport, are given the opportunity to officiate. In my experience, officiating teaches kids a whole heap of skills which are transferable to life. Authority, decision-making, responsibility, respect, just to name a few. And if we can have that within our sport with these kids, it's going to make, as Claire said earlier, quite correctly, the sports are going to be better, our youth are going to be better, our communities are going to be better, and and certainly for the AIS and the Australian Sports Commission, we're going to produce more gold medalists because we've got better level officials officiating all our young athletes.
Claire, there must be a massive problem all around Australia. You'd have thousands of games of netball on any Saturday. How do you cope with that in netball, and how do you provide that support we mentioned before to those young officials?
Yeah, well, and for those in the Townsville community that don't know, your association actually won Association of the Year in Queensland this year. So word up, Townsville Netball Association. So I think that regional netball associations within Australia are amazing. Sometimes they're stronger than our metropolitan associations just in the way that they do their job and how they operate. But I think the largest thing is that in netball we don't have a lot of money, and so we do become reliant upon the volunteers who work at those associations to do these jobs. And the biggest thing that I think is required if we're wanting to have these things is you need a culture shift, you need a change and an emphasis placed on these things and the importance that it plays in the future of the sport. Because when you can demonstrate to your whole community why it should be of value and why it's important, and the stuff that Steve's playing is said before is spot on in terms of the skills that you develop there and the transference that they have to real life. Who wouldn't want to provide those opportunities and those things to their developing players or to people that have been contributing to their game for a really long time? And I think that it's our responsibility as, you know, people who are a part of a sporting community to do that for each other. And I know I went out to Saturday netball last weekend at Pine Rivers Netball Association on the north side of Brisbane, and we don't often get the opportunity to do that in season when we're playing. So I haven't been able to go out to associations in a really long time. But I had more fun in that hour and a half just walking around the courts, talking to the girls, watching them play, and just seeing the enjoyment that they had just from being at netball on a Saturday than I have in a really long time when I've been at a sporting event. And I think that when you can see the impact that sports participation has on our younger generation, you want to give them the most that they can. And if these are skills that we can equip them with to make them better people, then it's all of our responsibilities to ensure that we're doing that. And so I think it's a top-down approach in terms of how the associations manage that and ensuring that everyone's aware of the reasoning as to why they're doing it and the benefits that will come as a result of it.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to invite #Ash to the floor. And if Claire, you can just stand over there. That's all right.
Okay, this question's for you, Claire. As a player, what do you consider are the key traits of the best officials?
Yes, I think some of the best officials that I had were the ones who, were consistent and consistently fair and stuck by their decisions in the moment, but were also able to recognise when they had made an error. And I think the best officials I ever played or were a part with also had the capacity to collaborate. So they would approach me if they would see something that they would recognise that I needed to be aware of, and vice versa. If I approached them as a captain to have discussions with them, they were open and amenable to feedback. That's something that we do regularly in netball at quarter time and half-time breaks, is go and talk to the umpires. And so the best officials that I had, they could make They've got to have an open conversation with you and be, willing to accept feedback and adapt and enact on that.
Claire, can I pick up on that one while Ash is getting the next question? Knowing the officials at your top level, did it affect your psyche as an athlete if you had somebody coming out, oh God, this is going to be a tough game because of the way they officiate? Did that affect your preparation for a game?
It didn't affect my mental preparation in terms of like, oh no, we've got this person again. It just probably made us more aware of the style that we would need to implement for that specific game. So I was talking about that key moment of adaptation in terms of learning and adapting and changing how we do things. An official will just officiate to the rules of the match. So it's your responsibility as a player to play to the rules of the game. And if they are seeing that you are infringing, then you can't change their mind on that. You will have to change and be flexible with the way that you play, and that's our responsibility as a player and as coaches also to adapt that. So that's probably more the approach that we took, and especially at an international level in netball, the quality of umpiring is significantly different at an international level to what it is at a domestic level. We are spoilt at a domestic level. We do not get the same quality and the same level of umpires internationally. We have men from Jamaica who don't umpire week in and week out through a continuous domestic season, and we'll have women from South Africa that are the same. And unfortunately, the level of competition that they umpire is just not as good as what it is in Australia. So when we go and play at an international level, we've got the equivalent of state league umpires umpiring us at an international game. So we have to adapt. We have to be flexible. You have to be patient, and that's just part of being a sports person.
Thanks, Claire. Ash?
So I'm going to throw this one to you, Claire, as well, because you've mentioned at the grassroots level, it's a good thing for players to do umpiring and those sorts of courses. But do elite athletes do officiating courses as well to get an edge?
No, they don't. I would say that a majority of the girls who play Suncorp Super Netball probably couldn't tell you a lot of the rules. There's new rule changes that have been instated into our competition this year at the elite level. I would say at least 70% of the players would have no idea what those rules are. Even in the 2016 grand final, for any of you that watched that, it was a rematch against the Sydney Swifts. It went into double extra overtime, and half the girls on court didn't know what was going on. So they didn't understand what needed to play out. So no, we don't do enough of that at the elite level. We're meant to, but I think that again falls on the responsibility of the player. And I'm clinical and I'm like OCD, so I want to know every rule that exists and how I can play, how can I try and get around it. Not in a bad way, I'm not a cheater, but I just like to play to the way that the game is structured, and I think that that's something that we don't do enough of at all. Do they do it in rugby league?
No. Yeah. Should they? Yes. In my experience as a referee, when I refereed NRL, the most dangerous players to deal with were the ones that knew the rules. Every one of them think they know the rules. Unfortunately, in excess of 90% of them don't. But many years ago, we went round to all of the clubs. The NRL had an initiative, and when I say many years ago, I was still running around, so it was 10 years ago plus. We went to every NRL club and put the players through a very basic referee course. We gave them we had some video presentations, then we gave them some written exams. Then we took them out on the park to give them some practical. And it was like when they were doing the written exams, it was like sitting in a kindergarten class. Oh, they're all putting their hands up. What does this mean? What does this mean? What's the answer to this? And the odd player, I went to the Manly Club, and there was a player there by the name of Travis Burns who used to be a nightmare for players. And he asked me a question. I said, mate, you tell me that every week when I referee you. He said, yeah, but I don't know what the answer is. I can't write it down. He said, it's all bluff. And then we took them out to referee games, and he was as nervous as anyone I've ever seen. I said, what are you shaking for? He said, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, but you tell referees every week, you question rules based on what? It's all bluff. We don't know the rules. And that was by their own admission. But to answer the question, yes, yes we should, and no we don't.
I'm going to round it up there, guys, only for the sake of time. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Claire, so much. We're going to have some more from Steve, so can you welcome them, thank them, please?